to be recorded. Okay, hello and welcome everyone to the Versatile Data Kit community meeting. I'm going to quickly share the agenda. So today on the agenda, we have a little welcome introduction. I'm going to shortly, really briefly to introduce the project and the people on this call. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the release. And then, yeah, Eva is going to introduce the Postgres integration. And as we just have returned from data science conference, and we have 3 speakers actually in the room, which is Tony, Tamira, and Victor. They will shortly present or talk about their experience at the conference. And if you don't know what is Versatile Data Kit, at the moment, I will just give a quick intro. Here is the repository. It's an open source project that is made to build, run, and manage your data pipelines with Python or SQL on any cloud. And here we have an image in the repository of how it works before, with or without Versatile Data Kit. And where without a Versatile Data Kit, there are multiple data sources, possibly multiple ingestion tools and transformation tools, which can create dependencies and silos and kind of problems with managing this data cycle. And when the Versatile Data Kit comes in, then there is one tool managing the whole data pipeline. And the 2 components that are part of Versatile Data Kit is Data SDK, which is responsible for the build part, data extraction, transformation, loading, and the control service part, which is for kind of orchestration and infrastructure to create, deploy, and manage data jobs on Kubernetes. And here's another little image that's supporting to understand better. So from data sources, there is an ingestion job, then there is a transformation job and export data job as part of VDK. Installation is here below. We have a really good tutorials on how to use VDK linked in the repository, and the documentation can be found in our wiki, and also some examples over here. So, and now, before we jump into the topics for today, I wish us to introduce ourselves a bit, and because we are kind of talking about conferences today, I want you to share maybe something about your conference experience, just like a quick, maybe your favorite conference, or maybe you haven't been to any, so just a quick share of your name, who you are, and what is your experience with conference. And I will start. So my name is Agita. I'm community manager of VDK, and well, my most recent and most maybe memorable experience is that I was invited to speak at DevOps Days in Canada, and I was speaking here in my room, and we started kind of the conversation about being cold in this weather, and I got so cold during this panel discussion that I was literally shivering on this chair. And even got some muscle cramp, and it was a really funny moment in my life. And when I was speaking for the first time at some conference, and I was really shaking, not of anxiety, but of cold in my room. So yeah, yeah. I'll pass the word to I don't know, maybe Tony.
Yeah, I'm Tony Ivanov. I'm lead maintainer for Style Data Kit. I've been on a couple of conferences and events now, and yeah, I think I don't have any interesting story. I haven't shivered in cold, fortunately, or in hot. I don't think I have favorite conference. Every conference has its own. You learn different things and you see from different perspectives. We've been on conference looking from infrastructure perspective, from software perspective, from data perspective, and it's a bit different every time.
Thank you. Demira?
So, hi, my name is Demira. I'm actually a heavy user, maybe a power user of VDK. So I'm leading a data analytics team in VMware who are using the tool. Sorry, the framework. It's a framework. It's not just a tool. It's more than that. So actually, I've been to multiple conferences along with Tony and Dako here on the call, where essentially I'm sharing my experience from the user perspective of VDK. And that's it. I used to be individual contributor, heavily utilizing VDK on a daily basis. Now I'm mostly monitoring, using the monitoring part of it. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. Victor?
Yes, I'll take the torch. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Victor. I'm a data engineer. As Demi, I'm a user of the Versatile Data Kit. And to answer the question about which is my favorite conference, it's the one that I have not been in. So it's actually not one, it's many. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks. Paul?
I'm Paul. I'm a software engineer on the VDK project. I've actually never been to a conference, so I don't have a favorite one.
Okay, thank you. Eva?
Hello, my name is Eva, and I bootstrapped the biggest adoption of Versatile Data Kit within the VMware company. And we migrated more than 50% of the workload to the open source VDK version. And now I transferred to VDK design and development and popularization and open source community to help build the VDK future together.
Okay, thank you. Eva, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sivo. I'm a software engineer at VMware. I have nothing to do with VDK. And as Paul, I have also never been on a conference, but I would love to be on one. And maybe this will be my favorite one. But I'm working on other projects in part of VMware on the analytics side.
Okay, Dako?
Hello, my name is Dako, and I'm a manager at VMware. I'm responsible for the production deployment of VDK inside the company. And I don't know if I have a favorite conference. I've been to a couple of conferences. The most recent one I attended was KubeCon earlier this year in Spain. It was really nice, a great experience. Lots of people. I met Agita in person there, and we had a great time with the rest of the team. So yeah, I should say I quite enjoyed it. And I learned a lot of new things there. So it was great. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, by the way, my favorite conference is FOSDEM, and it's happening around the beginning of February. So for the people who haven't been to any conference, this is the best place to go, I think. And also it's totally about open source and the community is huge. So highly, highly recommend. And I will see you there if you're going. So yeah, let's keep with the agenda. I think now I pass the word to Tony about the release. You have something to share?
Yeah, it's we do, I think on every community meeting, I'm gonna share what we've done since the last community meeting. This way we make like releases, that's about release announcements. You can see them on the GitHub page in the releases, weekly releases. Show. So yeah, the release at 0.9 that I made today is including things that we've done in the last month, basically. So major features are, one thing is we introduced a new plugin called VDK Meta Jobs. It's in pre-alpha stage, but still in this plugin, you can specify dependencies between data jobs as direct acyclic graph, which looks something like this, very simplified. You say depends on, you say what other jobs it depends, and this meta job would execute and orchestrate all the other jobs. You can there much more details and examples in the plugin homepage. This was done part of a hackathon, and I believe it was demonstrated on the previous community meeting, but officially it was merged in this month. So that's why it's released in this part of this cycle. I know that there was quite a bit of interest from our users about it. So I think even we are planning to work on making it pass the pre-alpha stage into more production usage. We did quite a bit of control service security hardenings, which were mostly led by Miroslav Ivanov, who is not here. There are some things that are mentioned here. You can see them here later if you want. As one particular security hardening was adding a new feature in the control service. The control service is the tool that's used to one of the things it does. It allows users to deploy jobs using so-called single-click deployment. So now when administrators are installing the control service, they can limit what kind of files can be uploaded. So they can specify a new configuration setting of the control service called upload validation file types allow list. And say, for example, we only allow image PNG or text plain. And then when end users, data engineers, data analysts, like Dimir or Victor, try to upload something that is not PNG image or text plain, they'll be rejected. This is just an example. The purpose being to avoid any kind of files that are potentially malicious, be it accidental or on purpose. There's a lot more. There's more information in the Helm chart documentation. There's also a new plugin called VDK login format. It's more of an aggregation of two previous plugins. Because I realized that probably having a single plugin for changing the login format would be much easier with configuration options than having to install separate plugins every time, which is what Gabriel did, I think. Now you can control the login format using a configuration options instead. And currently supports JSON, LTSV, and text, JSON, LTSV, and a type of structure logging. And finally, it's something that Eva is going to talk about, so I'll let her explain. That's, I think, is you can see every single change, also the main components that were changed during this month, and you can see all the detailed changes in the below, in the release page.
Question: in the orchestrator, can you account for ingestion latency?
No, I mean, what it accounts is the data job finishes. If the data job accounts for ingestion latency, then yes.
Okay, makes sense. And the file restriction is based on the file extension in the name, right?
No, it's based on partially on it could be on multiple things. File extension is one of things, but it analyzes the file itself and looks it inside the file what type file it is.
Okay.
What about the VDK Meta Jobs new plugin? Does it have some prerequisites for a contributor or a VDK user to install and use?
Well, the only prerequisite is that you need to have control service installed because it orchestrates jobs that are deployed by the control service. There are no other, and of course, the plugin itself should be installed in your VDK distribution. There are no other prerequisites.
Okay, great.
Cool.
If there are no further questions, I think, yeah, we can pass the word to Eva.
I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if you can see it.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So during the last couple of days, we enabled the Postgre embedded support for VDK, and I'm going to cover that and start first with why do we need Postgre embedded and what embedded does it mean and so on. Let's take a quick view on the database market share, like overall the industry view. If you consult one public source or another, they seem like similar, and then they tend to show that PostgreSQL has like around 20% of market share. And the leading database would be MySQL database, and probably about 20 or 30 databases having in a sorted fashion. And then we go to CockroachDB. This data is, I have provided a link for it. It's a public source. I believe as Lintel is a company that deals with, they call it Sixth Sense or public usages analytics, and that includes relational databases adoption. And why do I compare with CockroachDB in particular? Because the default database currently in VDK is CockroachDB. So when you install the VDK Pipelines Control Service, you need to either have a priorly provisioned database and configure a data source to connect with it, or you need to, or the VDK can do this for you, and it bootstraps a CockroachDB instance locally automatically for you, and it uses it. So on the current default database is CockroachDB. It has about 0.11 market share on the background of all the relational databases in the industry, and the adoptions by users, like companies, are about 384 in comparison with 60K of the PostgreSQL popular database. Regarding the industry usages analysis, and the PostgreSQL is mainly used for software development category and machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data, and agnostic technology, software, web development stuff. And again, CockroachDB would be like mainly used for technology, again, big data, like 12 companies do use CockroachDB for big data purposes, cloud computing, e-commerce, fintech, mobile, and then we'll be using it for artificial intelligence. This data is also based on the same source. As Lintel. And for example, if you take the next most popular comparison of both, it shows like similar market share values. PostgreSQL would be like 6.22% and the CockroachDB around near 0% on the background of all the other databases adoption. This is another alternative and-lift source of analysis. And also, this is an overall summary of how the one compares to the other in terms of categories and adoption. And the common category is relational database. So people mostly tend to use relational object databases based on statistics of those sources. So that is why, based on popularity, it's probably worth to compare and consider having an alternative embedded support for Postgre, in addition to CockroachDB at least. Another thing to consider is how well trusted the database is, because both of the databases are open sourced. However, only PostgreSQL is, for example, Bitnami available. And Bitnami, I have provided a link below. And that is a repository that tends to apply some security, testing compliance, and basically all the open source solutions provided by Bitnami tend to be passing some security and compliance checks already. So that is another plus for having PostgreSQL as an alternative to the CockroachDB installation, because the CockroachDB is hosted in GitHub, and whatever change is applied, it's not actually evaluated through any external process for compliance, security, and so on. It just propagates to your installation, basically. And if you consider the biggest industry players that have to do with database storage, for example, let's take VMware database strategy. It was recently announced at VMware Explore that Postgre is a major way to go for VMware as a company. And there was a People's Choice Award for a topic. You can actually view it by yourself. They also rely on Postgre mainly. This topic won most interest by the people attending to this open conference. And it's a bit from the kitchen. It's information about databases popularity and how do we plan to use them and build our core services, let's say. Other big players in the industry, for example, Google Cloud SQL, again, they announce they support MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server. Amazon, they also do tend to support the same, Postgre and MongoDB and MySQL, of course. And this is the present cloud database reality. If you can recall, there was a popular TV show when Family Guy, I believe. So I guess Peter gave Peter some pink shirt to wear to the office, and he said, "I'm not that popular to be different." So I think VDK could, consider having the most adopted solution as a default database. So we have now the PostgreSQL support embedded. How do you enable it? You configure it in values YAML. You enable it, and then you have some default configuration provided for you. This is going to be spawned for you automatically. And I wanted to talk a bit about data jobs metadata and ingesting data. So currently, when you install like VDK with CockroachDB embedded, it persists the data jobs metadata only. And if you attempt to ingest any data payloads, what do you expect to happen as a user? That's a question. So basically, since currently we don't have any ingested method default configured, if you just install VDK as a new user, you're not going to be able to ingest any data. So you need a database instance to store it. You could use in-memory, or you could use some database instance. And eventually you could reuse the CockroachDB that gets provisioned by default, or you could reuse the PostgreSQL that gets provisioned for you by default. And probably that's a good point to think about in the future. Do we want like people who install VDK to have it wired with the best configurations possible, so that they have all of the workloads enabled, and or rather have it, you know, how to say, rather have something installed that needs to have some additional configuration provided further. And I think when people install VDK, they need to be able to automatically ingest data as well, and have all of the default configurations set and tailored at their best, so that the VDK user quickly can demo and see the VDK capabilities, in favor of having something that needs to be additionally configured in order to do the most important workflows like ingesting data. So if you don't have any questions, do you have any opinions on what should be the default database? Do you have any opinion on what the ingesting method should be by default?
So just to clarify, at the moment, it is supported, this Postgres like support. It is already there, or is just like up to discussion? Because I didn't understand. I think you mentioned.
Yeah, so before the latest changes, we only supported CockroachDB as an embedded database. So if you want to use the VDK Postgre plugin and have work done with the Postgre instance, you need to provide this instance externally in addition, and configure your local VDK installation to access it and use it. And if you don't want or don't have the time to spend, or if you want to quickly review, or if you want VDK to provision a database for you, the choice you had previously was only to use the embedded CockroachDB support that was priorly available. And now we have another possibility that's not currently the default one for backwards compatibility purposes. Yet it could be a discussion, like further discussion. So a person can enable the PostgreSQL and in favor of the CockroachDB. And then when you install the VDK and you haven't provided any external data source to use, the pipelines control service is going to create the Postgre based on your particular configuration. Like for default, I believe 1 or 2 replicas having some default memory and CPU usages, and then it's going to use it.
So your suggestion is to make Postgres the default one.
Well, do you think it makes sense? Because it seems like people in the industry that do machine learning and deal with big data, and by people I mean many people working in many companies, they really tend to have preference for PostgreSQL, and this is one the statistics shows. And it seems interesting to me. Why don't we adopt the widely industry adopted solution, and we tend to use something that has near 0% of market share currently as our default solution? And another question is, because we tend to use like Bitnami as a fundament for our dependencies because it's secure and compliant. Why not use the Bitnami chart provided for PostgreSQL and in favor of the public non-compliant GitHub CockroachDB currently.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I don't know actually the answer, but maybe someone has some opinion really. And why initially it is the CockroachDB?
If I understand correctly, in order to set it as default as Postgres, the user would need to provide additional configurations. Is that correct?
Currently, what the user provides is cockroach enable true, and that is sufficient to when you install the chart. When you do Helm install, basically you provide this Boolean configuration cockroach enable true, and the rest of the configuration, it comes by default, and the default is the way listed here.
Yeah, but I'm asking about Postgres. In order to have Postgres as the default database, after enabling it, would you still need to provide additional configurations for the host, the port, things like this?
Yeah, well, this is not required. So again, common to CockroachDB. The only thing you need to do is enable it, and all of the rest configurations would default to these defaultly described ones. And also, you need to disable the CockroachDB because it's currently set to default. And if you enable both at the same time, the default one is going to take preference. So you would have CockroachDB installed by default.
Yeah, but what I see here, these are parameters for memory, CPU usage, and things like this. If my understanding is correct.
They're corresponding to the same parameters we used to have for CockroachDB. So basically, we translated those. And Postgre has a particular format for having the same configurations. And not only Postgre, in fact, a lot of the Bitnami charts have this as a standard. So if you decide to adopt another database published by Bitnami that is open sourced and trusted and secured, it's going to have like this type of structure for this particular same commands, like configuring the CPU limit for a pod, basically. So this structure you can expect from everything that is published with Bitnami, because they keep common like convention for all published software. And this one is slightly different. However, it describes same stuff almost.
I think there was a bit of a confusion here because
yeah, what he's asking. Sorry, I think I can answer the question as well. Like, just so I understand, you're asking like, does the service automatically get wired with the URL to connect to Postgres? Is that kind of, in summary, the question?
Yeah, if that is the question, so yes, an embedded database would mean that it will be installed automatically for you, and the control service is going to be auto-configured to connect to it. So that may be, if that's the question, I guess this is the answer.
Then I think that at least for us in the room, it's more convenient to have the Postgres as default.
Yeah, I think
I'm not part of VDK, but as a database geek, I would vote for Postgre because its usage, it's open source community, and also, as you said, there are some compliance and security checks from Bitnami, and this has a lot of value and trust in it, so it makes sense to go with Postgre as default.
Well, yeah. So do you think it's valuable, there is a valuable scenario of people reusing the same data source for storing data jobs metadata and also storing data payloads they have been ingesting via running data jobs, per se?
Yeah, it makes sense.
On my side, I would say that maybe only if the data is slow, because this way you hurt the performance whenever you were considering the database only for metadata operations. I would personally think that isolation between two databases would be a much better option, especially that if you're trying to ingest data, the volume will be huge.
If we are talking for production environment, yes, but as I understand, we are currently debating on the default settings that would be probably most used for demo and trying the software.
Yeah, I think there are two workflows that we can differentiate. Like one is when you have a newcomer to the project and he or she wants to quickly bootstrap and review locally what are the capabilities of VDK and have a local setup quickly. So he or she can run an example and do a quick evaluation, or even a contributor for the open source project who wants to quickly set up a local development environment and test and verify the changes. I believe they usually tend to use the embedded option, because in a commercial enterprise setup, the companies tend to have like already set up a data lake they want the data to be ingested to, or they have externally supported, maybe the owner is some different team within the company. So my impression is that the enterprises usually tend to not rely on defaultly installed solutions, but approach this problem individually and spend some time on support with each individual component.
Oh, this makes perfect sense, but for me personally as a software engineer, I would prefer to have defaults that follow best practices, just to have a better outline to how it's supposed to be used, but also the convenience of having something out of the box also has its value. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to kind of sum up. I think we don't have even like anyone arguing against having this default. So it just makes sense to kind of move this idea forward, I think.
Yeah, and so one more thing I wanted to ask about your impression on installing a clean VDK and started to work with it. Do you usually start to ingest data as a major demo example or use case? Because if you do so, maybe you need to have some ingestion method configured by default. Because the alternative is you're going to try to ingest data and you're going to see some warning that you need to actually do some additional configuration in order to ingest data. So let me rephrase the question. So maybe we had some workshops with some customers or attendees to a conference, and they did install locally VDK. Did they have to configure additionally the ingest method, or did they only run other types of like processing data jobs, for example?
Well, I can answer from the perspective of the user. Typically, we as users really don't configure anything. We get it set up as a service, kind of a framework. Like for example, DataOps team is doing that for us. So essentially, we say, hey, we want to work with this database. They pre-configure it, and once we install the SDK, the VDK SDK, we start to work with the configured input and output database as given to us. If I take the use case the setup that we work in, we have a lot of data already in the database that we are using with VDK. So yeah, we can directly start transform, but we actually heavily utilize VDK for a lot of ingestion types of data jobs as well. So to your question, I think the configuration is kind of done by the infrastructure team. We use it for granted from a user perspective.
Okay. So that's just food for thought. Maybe we need to consider having some default ingestion method configured for the open source version. And I wanted to mention our channels where new ideas or following up on some of the topics we mentioned can happen. That is the VDK the GitHub repository, issues contributing pull requests, and our channel and our mailing list. And I actually wanted to take a minute to have a proposal for the next meeting, just to quickly throw an idea and get a first impression and close the topic. So I thought about applying the 3-click rule to VDK installation. So there is this old web design rule that is about users navigating for a web page, and it says that the user should be able to locate and find any information and complete a useful task within no more than 3 clicks. And I thought maybe it's useful to apply this rule to VDK installation and have an easy local setup for people to demo and do workshops and evaluate. So I wanted to throw this idea here. If someone is interested to collaborate on this idea, may message me in Slack or yeah.
Eva, one question. Can you share the presentation again on the second slide?
Yep.
And also time check.
Yeah.
Just was something quick. I think that these numbers, to me at least, seem a little bit off because I've been monitoring the Stack Overflow. Each year they make a survey where people input what technologies are they using. And Postgres was almost equal, or I don't remember, maybe the last year was even higher than MySQL.
Yeah, Postgre nowadays is used by almost anyone, and 6K users. This seems like, I don't know. Maybe this is just a survey between some enterprises, because I don't know, 60K. This looks like just too little. Even 10 years ago, I don't think it's.
Yeah. It might be possible. I have provided the particular sources I rely on to form these slides. They are most probably a bit off, however, give like a relative correct snapshot and image of how the one solution compares to the other, and the one solution being the default one we use, and the other, the one we introduced as a embedded capability. So yeah, probably not focusing on a particular number per se, but like the overall direction both databases adoption is going.
Eva, if you can share the slides afterwards with
Yep.
me, I will also link them in the YouTube description, and actually also repository in the Slack channel link should be there. And now, yeah, not to overspend our time, I'm going to give word to Victor, Anthony, and Demira, and you can share your experience with the data science conference that we visited last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so yeah, just go for it.
Okay, I can start. Well, it was really good conference, a lot of interesting talks. It was good that actually the conference was split in three main themes. One was completely for data science. One was targeted more like data engineering, and the last one was for AI for games. So yeah, there were a lot of talks for data engineering, which was good, and we were there speaking about it. Specifically for my presentation alone, it was targeted for let's say not experienced people in data engineering. It was about PEP 249, where I showed the document, showed the key concepts in it, and run a sample data job via VDK to showcase its capabilities. and how it's how PEP 249 is implemented in the VDK itself.
Yep, I actually visited Victor's talk, as you can imagine, and yeah, I think it was great, and you know, a lot of people said that they are already using this framework, so that was good. Tony, would you like to go before me, because I want to share some slides, and it will probably take a bit more time.
Yeah, I was planning to share slides, but I'll be quick.
Okay.
So basically what I talk about is suppose practical Kimball data patterns. Basically in the ML especially, basically this is the usual data science process. You need to get data, export it, and model the data. This is very set, I know. The talk will be published, I hope, soon on YouTube, and then you'll be able to see the whole thing. Oh, this one won't be. Yeah, it won't.
So they have recorded it, actually.
Yeah, then there's no recording for this one.
Yeah, they forgot.
So
They forgot?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, so probably I can make more detailed talk some other time, but generally the overall thing I talk about is how we can use dimensional modeling in order to be able to model data and to use this data for ML. Dimensional modeling is mainly three things. It's mainly how do you structure your data as a fucking dimension tables. Dimension table being descriptive data, like it answers the questions where, what, how, when, how much, and so on. It's a primary descriptive data. In a way, if we compare it to vocabulary, this is the nouns and adjectives that describe the sentence. And the fact table is the verb, it's the action, it's the event that actually happens. And it's usually numerical data. And we talked about the benefits of dimensional modeling, and primarily Kimball, who is the man who came with it and proposes the architecture process and design patterns. And finally, we showed how one can implement the dimensional modeling using versatile data kit, and how one can use the dimensional modeling to create an ML model, a very simple linear regression that predicts usage of electrical vehicles. Basically, our use case, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it was either Dimir or Victor or somebody who came up with it initially, was this one. We can imagine that we work for Volkswagen or Tesla, and our customers complain that their battery is drained in the middle of a trip. We want to provide them with an app which predicts how much battery will be drained based on different actions they take, based on the how far do they use heated seats or not, what speed do they drive, and we use the versatile data kit and dimensional modeling to get the data and to create a model. This was the second part, which was the practical part of the session. Overall, it was about 2 hours. So, but hopefully, I'll be able to sometime do a presentation just for the dimensional modeling without the practical part, which we can share and record because there's no in the near future. Yeah, that was what I want to share.
thank you.
Okay. And actually, Tony and I had a joint talk about DataOps as a service. So actually, I shared a story that was real world life example and scenario that happened. So essentially, what we shared with Tony was some time back, like 7 years back. We had the following setup. We had two teams. The first team extracting and loading data from Salesforce, which is a CRM, into a database. And I was part of that second team who was actually consuming that data, essentially using that data as a product. My team back then was ingesting data from multiple data sources, like databases, like scraping UIs, etc. But for that particular Salesforce data, we actually relied and created dependency on another team. What happened is that I was on a vacation, and one of my colleagues called me that they had a problem that they couldn't find why the most recent data wasn't appearing in one of our reports, and actually that report was viewed by the CEO. We drew down together to find out that the underlying part of the underlying data was actually coming from Salesforce, and essentially the Salesforce data wasn't updating as often as it should have, and hence all the data, all the dates that were not ingested were essentially missing in our final report. The question here is, why couldn't they fix that problem? Because it sounds like a super trivial problem, like daily operations for data engineers. Why they couldn't fix it without me? Well, the first team I used to work as part of data team 1, and I still had my access at the time, and I could go to all the VMs where all the processes were running, and I could actually figure out what was going on. So essentially, the only reason why I could help there was just because I had access to those data processing jobs. And this, as I mentioned, this is kind of a trivial problem, and we need to know that this would happen. We need to have efficient tools to actually trace the whole data flow from the system, the source system, to the very exit of our system. So essentially, a couple of things that I wanted to iterate here today is that what happens is that we have a super fragmented infrastructure, multiple teams writing their data workloads on different tools, different places, no end-to-end data path visibility, which was essentially making debugging a real nightmare. And actually also slowing down adding additional metrics to a report because actually at the time you actually had to use different systems to develop your workloads, and this could take a while to build up your data streams. The key point here is end-to-end data path visibility. This was the thing that hurted us the most during this use case. And what we actually shared was how Versatile Data Kit is going to improve on that problem. Well, essentially, what VDK does provide is one unified interface that is managed interface that is self-service, and is actually a central place where all the data workloads can be published, deployed, or integrated with. So you can actually have a full end-to-end data path visibility from how the data enters from the source system, all the multiple iterations of data that happen afterwards, till, as I mentioned, till this data gets out of the system. But actually, VDK is a framework. There was one more important thing that we have to mention here is treat the data as a product. What I mean here is that Versatile Data Kit actually does allow us to automate all the data workflows that we as data engineers and data analysts do, and actually start thinking about the data sets that we produce, not just as some tables with some columns and some metrics, but rather than that, treat it as a product with the same SLA and the same standards that we treat software products that we launch back on the market. So what does this mean? Well, that means clear SLAs. That means clear inputs and outputs, which essentially means where is my data coming from, how it's being transformed, where is it going. And we actually shared one more thing that I kind of want to acknowledge here, but I'm not going to spend too much time because I want to focus on the end-to-end data path visibilities. That there are two personas as part of this journey. On the one hand, as I believe Ivo also shared, is that we have the infrastructure team which provides us with the versatile data kit installation, but we also have the multiple data teams that are part of an enterprise or big organization, who have the domain knowledge, who implement the business logic, who optimize for agility and speed, and they want to produce their analytics quickly. And that is actually what they should focus on. And versatile data kit should actually allow them to be more efficient on their day-to-day job. So let me actually go to the next part. I'm going to skip a couple of slides here for the sake of time. As I mentioned, the problem with the data flow and debugging how our data has changed before we use it in our final reports is actually quite common. What VDK does provide is unified interface, support for any standard interfaces that we as data engineers and data analysts know, starting with simple SQL, but also using Pandas data frames or PySpark, PyTorch, you name it, any Python database API that we use, or really anything that you can think of in SQL or in Python that we do on a daily basis to triage data, get data, manipulate it, etc. This is why I'm saying that. Well, because once we have data jobs running on VDK that are manipulating data, which means extracting data, transforming it, or publishing it somewhere, VDK automatically captures the lineage for that data and actually create that lineage graph that you see. This is a very simplistic lineage graph that you see on that screenshot with the integration with Marquez. Bless you. But actually, you can imagine how powerful this would be on a larger scale, where you actually have multiple transformation steps. And you can very easily trace any downstream data inaccuracies and go back to the whole data lineage path or the data end-to-end data traceability path. So you can actually go and fix the right place, or if you do not own that data transformation step, you can at least see who deployed that data job. You can see what that data job does, and you can recommend the owner of that particular data job to fix the problem, so your analytics is not impacted. This is something that we use internally on a daily basis, and this is something that has been, I would say, quite revolutionary for me and for hopefully my team as well. But having that data visibility is very critical. I must say here that we do have teams that are running Airflow data jobs. And because VDK has integration with Airflow, one of the interfaces here could also be Airflow. So actually, it's not only just data jobs that are written for VDK, but it's also all the, I would call them like the brownfield data jobs that your company already has and you're working with, can be integrated with VDK, so you can actually extract the lineage for the data processing that happens on that side as well. So you can actually have this visibility as well. So I think that's all I wanted to say on this slide. And I just wanted to, before we kind of finalize this presentation, I just want to go back to the initial story that I mentioned. And I just want to reiterate how versatile data kit changed the operation flow that we use on a daily basis. So that dark green is actually the versatile data kit framework. and you can see the multiple data jobs deployed on VDK. By the way, this could easily be an Airflow data job and using the integration with VDK as well. Where we put the data, I'm as a consumer consuming the data that is coming as an output from the first data job. So when I see that my data is not appearing, I can directly open the code. I can see what the first team has produced. I cannot amend it, but I can at least see it so I know that there was a problem there. And also I can see whether that data job has successfully run during the last couple of runs. So I can also check if it was successful or not. So this is the story essentially that I wanted to share on how we actually fixed that end-to-end data path visibility for our team in VMware. And yeah, I hope if someone would be watching this would find it relevant for their problems as well. This talk is recorded for sure. Yes, it is recorded and will be published in the next couple of months. I don't know when exactly.
I think it will take half a year based on their previous.
Okay, so yeah, it would come in half a year. But if there is interest, and maybe for the people who potentially can watch this YouTube recording afterwards, you can just share in the comments below whether you would like to get some more information about this data, end-to-end data path visibility, and we can probably do specific targeted super drill down presentation on that topic itself.
And I will link it if it's published. When it's published, I will link it to this community meeting also, description recording on the YouTube. Yeah, and if I can ask you now, just to share back your slides and go back to the Christmas. Yeah, just any of these slides. Because yeah, I just want to finish, kind of close this meeting with a quick announcement for the next meeting. So we're having the next community meeting, like pre-Christmas kind of community meeting on 21st of December next month. And with Tony, we were brainstorming and kind of came to an idea that we could be Christmas themed. So maybe if you have any ideas what we could present or prepare, or maybe some kind of something that might be connected with Christmas and implement with VDK, feel free to suggest something.
And the theme for today was Family Guy, right?
Yeah, somehow it was Family Guy actually. So yeah. And with Demira also we discussed, and we might start doing YouTube live meetings. It hasn't been actually, we haven't really debated this, but there is an idea in the air of having them live. And yeah, I think later on, like next month when the meeting is going to come closer, I will just announce if we're doing it live on YouTube or not. And yeah, so if someone is watching this recording and you have gone this far, then please go to our repository and put us a star. It's supporting us very much, and this is the minimum and very pleasant contribution that you can make to Versatile Data Kit project. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a pleasant time of the day, whatever it is for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.